Picture this. It's February 1st, 1959. 9 experienced hikers set up their tent on a remote, frozen mountain in the heart of Russia. They're young, they're fit, and they know exactly what they're doing. But by morning, all 9 of them would be dead. And what happened to them is one of the most disturbing mysteries of the 20th century. When search teams finally found their camp weeks later, the scene made no sense. Their tent was slashed open from the inside, as if they were so desperate to escape they could uneven spare 2 seconds to use the zipper. They had fled into a blizzard in temperatures of -30 degrees Celsius. Some were barefoot, some were only in their underwear. And the way they died was even stranger. 2 were found with fractured skulls. One man had a crushed chest with force investigators compared to being hit by a car. One woman was found missing her tongue, eyes, and lips. Several had skin that had turned a bizarre orange color, and some of their clothing tested positive for low levels of radioactivity. The Soviet investigation lasted 3 months, and then they just closed the case. The official cause of death, a quote, unknown compelling force. That was it. Case closed, files sealed. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. And 66 years later, we are no closer to knowing what that compelling force really was. Let's start from the beginning. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old student. He assembled a team of 9, all seasoned hikers and skiers, for a winter expedition to a mountain called Otorten. They set out on January 23, 1959. For the first few days, everything was fine. They kept a group diary, they took photos, and you can see them laughing, skiing through the snowy forests. On January 31st, they began their ascent, but the weather turned nasty. Visibility dropped. They veered off course and ended up on the slopes of a different mountain, one called Kholat Syakhl, in the local Mansi language. That name means dead mountain. Instead of retreating to the shelter of the forest below, they made the odd decision to set up camp right there on the exposed slope. They pitched their tent around 5 p.m. on February 1st, had dinner, and settled in for the night. And then, something happened. Something so terrifying that it made 9 experienced outdoorsmen cut their way out of their only shelter and run into a blizzard practically naked. When the group failed to check in by their planned date of February 12th, nobody was too worried at first. Delays happen. But as the days turned into a week, concern grew, and by February 20th, search parties were sent out. On February 26th, they found the tent. It was half collapsed and covered in snow, with those strange cuts made from the inside. But all their gear, their boots, their warm clothes, their foodite was all neatly arranged inside. They had left everything behind. Footprints led away from the tent, downhill towards a forest about 1.5 miles away. The prints showed that some were barefoot, some wore only socks. Following the tracks at the edge of the forest, the searchers found the first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. They were under a large cedar tree near the embers of a small fire, wearing only their underwear. High up on the tree, branches were broken as if they had climbed it to get a better view, maybe looking back at the tent or looking for something else. Both had died of hypothermia. Between that tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were discovered. Igor Dyatlov himself, Zenata Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. They seemed to have been trying to make it back to the tent before they collapsed. Slobodin had a small skull fracture, but the examiner said it wasn't a fatal injury on its own. All 3, again, were ruled to have died from hypothermia. That left 4 hikers missing. The search continued for 2 more months. It wasn't until May 4th, when the spring thaw began to melt the snow, that they were finally found. And this is where the mystery takes a truly dark turn. The remaining 4 were discovered in a ravine, buried under 13 feet of snow. Ludmila Dubinina, just 20 years old, had suffered catastrophic chest trauma. Her ribs were shattered with such force that bone fragments had been driven into her heart. But there were no external wounds, no signs of impact. And even more gruesomely, her tongue, eyes, and lips were gone. Nikolai Thibeaux-Bourgneul had a massive skull fracture, again with no external injury to explain it. The other two, Alexander Kalivatov and Alexander Zolotaryev, had also perished. To make things even weirder, the clothing on this group tested positive for low levels of radioactive contamination. Why? And then there were the witnesses. Other hikers and local tribespeople reported seeing strange, bright orange spheres in the sky around the time of the incident. Was it all connected? The Soviet investigators couldn't, or maybe wouldn't, answer these questions. The case files were classified and hidden away for decades, but the questions never went away. Over the years, dozens of theories have emerged. The most popular scientific explanation is the avalanche theory. The idea is that a slab of snow slid down and crushed the tent, causing the severe internal injuries and forcing the panicked hikers to cut their way out. But critics have problems with this. The search party found no evidence of an avalanche. The tent wasn't fully buried. The footprints leading away looked orderly, not like a frantic scramble. And it doesn't explain the radioactivity or the missing tongue. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case and, a year later, once again concluded that an avalanche was the cause. Many people found that answer deeply unsatisfying. Another theory points to secret military weapons testing. The Ural Mountains were a known site for Soviet military experiments. This could explain the orange lights, the radioactivity, and the government's secrecy. But if the military accidentally killed 9 of its own citizens, why not just cover it up completely? Why allow any public investigation at all? Then there's the infrasound theory. This suggests that a rare weather phenomenon called a Karaman vortex street could have been created by wind blowing over the mountain, generating extremely low-frequency sound waves. Infrasound is inaudible, but it's known to cause intense, irrational feelings of panic, dread, and nausea in humans. This could explain why they fled the tent in a state of terror. But again, it doesn't explain the brutal physical injuries. Other theories get even wilder: an attack by local tribespeople. The evidence doesn't support it. A run-in with escaped convicts. No escapes were reported. A bear attack. No animal tracks were found. And of course, some people point to the orange lights and the bizarre injuries and suggest an encounter with something not of this world. Not a single theory fits all the facts. Every explanation has holes. The tent cut from the inside, the missing clothes, the massive internal injuries with no external wounds, the missing tongue, the radiation, the strange lights in the sky. Any one of these could probably be explained away. But together, they create a puzzle that has remained unsolved for over 60 years. The mountain where they perished is now officially called Dyatlov Pass in their memory. 9 smart, experienced young people went up that mountain. And something on that slope was so terrifying, so overwhelming, that they chose to run towards certain death in a frozen wasteland rather than face it. Whatever it was, we still don't know. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. If this story sent a chill down your spine, hit that subscribe button. Because next time, we are rediving into the biggest aviation mystery of our time. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a modern jetliner with 239 people on board that just vanished. 10 years later, we still don't know what happened. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.